Welcome back. Today, we're going deep into the heart of one of the most pivotal and intellectually rich conflicts of the ancient world, the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. This wasn't simply a battle of swords and spears, it was a war of ideas, institutions, and strategies. It's the war that brought classical Greece to its knees, and the one that continues to inform political theory, international relations, and historical thought to this day. If you think this was just a power struggle between two Greek cities, think again. We're looking at an ideological confrontation between democracy and oligarchy, naval dominance and land power, imperial expansion, and defensive conservatism. To understand the Peloponnesian War, we need to start in the aftermath of the Persian Wars. In the early 5th century BC, Athens emerged as a powerful naval force. They led the Delian League, an alliance formed to continue the fight against Persia and protect the Aegean. But over time, Athens transformed this alliance into an empire. Member states were no longer allies but subjects. They paid tribute, and if they resisted, they were punished sometimes brutally. Sparta, by contrast, led the Peloponnesian League, a more traditional and defensive coalition. Unlike Athens, Sparta was a conservative, land-based power that valued stability and discipline. As Athenian influence expanded across the Aegean, Sparta began to view this rise with increasing alarm. Much of what we know about the Peloponnesian War comes from Thucydides, an Athenian general and arguably the first true political historian. Thucydides made a crucial distinction between immediate causes and underlying causes. The surface reasons for the war, like the conflicts over Corcyra and Potidaea and Athens' economic sanctions on Megara, were important flashpoints. But for Thucydides, the real cause was Sparta's fear of Athenian expansion. This diagnosis, grounded in fear, power dynamics, and long-term rivalry, is strikingly modern. It's what political scientists today might call a structural explanation, similar to theories in international relations. Thucydides was laying the groundwork for what we now call realism centuries before the term existed. The war itself unfolded in 3 major phases, each revealing new layers of complexity. The first was the Archidamian War, from 431 to 421 BCE. Sparta invaded Athenian territory almost every year, burning crops and forcing the Athenians to shelter behind their long walls. Athens, led initially by Pericles, avoided direct land combat and instead used its naval superiority to raid the Peloponnesian coast. Pericles' strategy was essentially to wait it out, believing Athens could sustain pressure longer than Sparta. But this plan was derailed by a devastating plague in 430 BCE, which killed up to 1/3 of Athens' population, including Pericles himself. The resulting political chaos in Athens weakened the coherence of its war effort. After a decade of inconclusive fighting, both sides agreed to a temporary truce known as the Peace of Nishes in 421 BCE. But it was a peace in name only. Hostilities continued on the margins, with proxy wars and skirmishes continuing throughout Greece. Then came the catastrophic turning point, the Sicilian expedition in 415 BCE. Athens launched a massive campaign to conquer Syracuse, a powerful city-state in Sicily. This was a gamble, some called it a delusion of grandeur. Thucydides presents it as a tragic case of democratic overreach. Poor planning, internal political conflict, and underestimating the enemy led to total disaster. The entire Athenian fleet was destroyed, and tens of thousands of troops were either killed or enslaved. The psychological and strategic blow was immense. The final phase, known as the Ionian or Decelean War, began in 413 BCE and lasted until the end of the conflict in 404. Sparta, now funded by Persian gold, built a navy capable of challenging Athens at sea. They fortified Decelia in Attica, cutting off Athens from its silver mines and land-based resources. This prolonged siege economy began to wear Athens down. Internal strife worsened. The democratic system was briefly overthrown by an oligarchic coup in 411 BCE, then restored, then challenged again. By 405, after the crushing defeat at Sparta, where most of the remaining Athenian fleet was destroyed, Athens was completely vulnerable. The city surrendered in 404 BCE. Its walls were torn down, its fleet reduced to a few ships, and an oligarchic regime, the 30 Tyrants, was installed by the victorious Spartans. But while Sparta had won the war, it didn't win the peace. Their hegemony was short-lived, and internal tensions among the Greek city-states remained unresolved. In fact, the Peloponnesian War marked the beginning of the decline of classical Greece. In the decades that followed, Thebes would challenge Spartan dominance, and eventually, Macedonia under Philip and then Alexander would sweep into unified Greece by force. The intellectual legacy of the war, however, was just beginning. Thucydides' work became a foundational text for understanding power, fear, and political realism. Plato's dialogues, written in the aftermath, reflect a deep anxiety about democracy's instability, especially in the trial and execution of Socrates, which took place in the shadow of Athens' defeat. Modern scholars continue to debate the war's deeper meanings. Some see it as a warning about imperial overreach, Athens as a cautionary tale of democracy corrupted by empire. Others see it as a necessary check on Athenian aggression. Still others frame it in terms of cultural competition, artistic, philosophical, political, between two fundamentally different ways of life. And interestingly, the war has become a metaphor in international relations. The so-called Thucydides trap refers to the tendency for rising powers to come into conflict with established ones, a concept often applied to U.S. China relations today. So, the Peloponnesian War wasn't just a bloody conflict between two ancient cities. It was a turning point in Western political thought, a moment when historians, philosophers, and statesmen began to grapple with the nature of power, justice, and the limits of human ambition. That's why we still read Thucydides. That's why the war still matters. If you've enjoyed this dive into deep history, make sure to subscribe for more intellectually driven content. And if you've got thoughts on Pericles, on Sparta, or on how this ancient war echoes in our modern world, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.